I heard the key in the lock before I heard her voice. My breath caught. It always does now, especially when I'm alone in the house at night. I remember how steady my breathing used to be, how normal, how sure of the world around me before everything. Now my lungs feel as though they've forgotten how to work. It was late, past midnight, and I was in the living room with the lights dimmed. Half-empty coffee mug on the side table. The television muted as if I couldn't stand hearing other people's voices. Then the front door opened. Rachel stepped in, followed by another figure. Tall, lean, a certain confidence in every movement. He set his hand on her lower back, guiding her inside like it was his place, not mine. There was an intimate elegance to the way they moved together. I was so shocked. I held my breath until my lungs practically cramped. She didn't notice me at first. They were laughing in hushed tones, conspiratorial in their closeness. That's when I felt my pulse spike. My entire body tensed, turning cold, and my mind raced through 100 half-formed thoughts. This can't be happening. Not in my house. Not with my wife. But my eyes told me it was real. I saw him lean in, David, the man I'd met once at some tech event months ago, and brush his lips against her neck. She tilted her head in a gesture of pure surrender. I didn't speak. I couldn't. A part of me wanted to leap off the couch and tear him out of my home, but another part of me felt frozen, pinned by my own disbelief. She whispered something, his name maybe, and he smiled. The living room light was low, so they must have only seen my silhouette. Eventually she noticed me, gasped, and jerked away from him. "You? Michael?" she stammered, sounding breathless. In the faint lamplight, I saw David's eyes narrow, flicking between me and her, gauging how big a problem I might be. He was younger than me, more physically built despite being lean. My mind reminded me that in a fight, I might lose. But something about the way I just sat there unnerved him. I could tell. It unnerved her too. I swallowed. No words came. I thought I might be trembling. I could hear the faint clink of ice in the glass next to me. As if my hand wasn't steady, she swallowed. He let out an awkward chuckle, tried to gather himself. I managed a single sentence, low and toneless. "Why are you here with him?" She froze, then forced a shaky laugh that died almost instantly. Hi. We were just talking. I didn't realize you'd be awake." Her eyes flickered around the room, looking for an escape, maybe a lie. David's hand remained at her waist, though now it was more protective, as if shielding her from me. "We thought you'd be out of town," he said quietly. I couldn't stand the sound of him. I noticed his cologne, something expensive. I glanced at Rachel. The transformation was cruelly obvious. Not the wife I knew, not the person who used to fall asleep reading next to me. Feet entwined. My breathing had turned ragged. Finally, I found my voice, though it felt as if it belonged to someone else. "Both of you, get out." She opened her mouth, but I cut her off with a gesture. My hand shot up. "Go." They left hurriedly, David's hand never leaving her back. All I heard was the click of the lock, the rush of footsteps. Then the silence that followed stabbed me deeper than I thought possible, because I realized I wasn't even screaming. I wasn't crying. Inside, it felt as though the ground had crumbled, and I was plunging somewhere beneath the life we built. But outwardly, all I could manage was a trembling exhale, and the room seemed darker as I whispered, "Zaneves," the way I sometimes do when I'm lost. Curtain, as if it were some final act. That night, I sat in the living room for hours, staring at the thin cracks in the walls. My breath would occasionally hitch like I was about to break, but I never did. My eyes kept drifting to the coffee mug, to the table, to the front door. I was almost expecting it to open again, for her to stumble inside, tears in her eyes, begging forgiveness. But that never happened. And so I just sat, remembering how we got here. I still recall the day we moved into this house. We were younger, more optimistic. My wife, Rachel Carter, was a novelist, one with a respectable following, though not yet a household name. I was Michael Carter, a journalist at a local newspaper. My dream was to write a book of my own one day, or perhaps shift to a bigger paper in a bigger city. We found ourselves in Chicago, chasing those moderate ambitions, content with our middle-class life. She wrote at home, in the small study overlooking the backyard. I hammered out columns and reported local stories. We'd eat dinners with soft music playing, talk about the future. That was over a decade ago. Over the last few years, something changed. I felt it like a slow crack forming in the foundation of a house, a subtle shift in weight you don't notice until everything's off-kilter. Rachel grew distant, ironically right around the time she started penning her final romance novel. We had arguments that ended unresolved, nights we slept back to back without a word. There was always some reason: her deadlines, my stress at work, the simple friction of two people drifting in different directions. Then, a few months ago, I found women's socks in the laundry. Only they weren't hers. They were smaller, a different style entirely, and I knew they didn't belong to me or to her. I confronted her about them, more baffled than accusatory. "Rachel, these aren't yours, right?" She hesitated a beat too long. "Must be a mix-up at the laundromat," she finally said, but the awkward tension in her voice told me otherwise. For a moment, I wanted to press, to demand the truth. But I remember feeling so tired, so worn down by the constant distance, that I just dropped it. Maybe I was afraid of what her real answer would be. Maybe I was still trying to believe that we were just going through a rocky phase. Let it go, I told myself. But the question lingered. If they're not hers, then whose? Soon after, she spent evenings away from home. At writers' workshops, or so she said. Occasionally, she'd come back wearing that look in her eyes that told me something had shifted between us yet again. We'd try to talk, but she would deflect, claiming exhaustion or deadlines. I tried to read her draft, something we used to do for each other, offering feedback. Yet she insisted she wasn't ready for me to see it. She grew protective of that manuscript. I'd wake in the middle of the night and see the glow under her study door, or catch her typing with furious intensity the next morning. My own columns took a backseat in my mind. I started losing focus at work. Little mistakes crept into my articles. My editor noticed but assumed it was burnout. Deep down, I was unraveling. The nights were the worst. I'd lie in bed, feeling her next to me, so close yet so unreachable. She seemed absent, even in her own body. I grew resentful, but also insecure. My sense of self, Michael Carter, stable journalist, decent husband, began crumbling. Despite all of this, I never quite pictured walking in on her with another man in our home. Perhaps I suspected an affair, but seeing it was different. It was like the difference between suspecting you might have a disease and hearing the doctor confirm it. There's a moment your reality changes, and you can't go back to innocence. She came home the next day in the late afternoon. Alone. I was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter. I hadn't left the house all day. I think she expected me to be gone. But I had nowhere else to go. I'd called in sick to work, claiming a migraine. My boss, sympathetic, told me to get well soon. If only he knew how impossible it was. Rachel walked in, set her purse on a chair. She paused, closed her eyes for a moment. Then she turned to me. "Michael," she said softly, voice trembling. "Let's talk." I stared at her for a long time. My breath kept snagging in my throat, like a record skipping. Finally, I nodded, more out of muscle memory than willingness. We sat at the kitchen table. She looked drawn, exhausted, maybe guilty. I folded my arms over my chest, a cold sense of finality creeping through me. She started. "I never wanted to hurt you. Everything. It just got so complicated." "Complicated," I said, my voice low. "Is that what you call bringing another man into our house?" She flinched, then tried to hold my gaze. David, he's just someone who made me feel alive again. I'm not excusing it, but I need you to understand. We haven't been close, you and I, for so long. I felt like I was suffocating. For a moment, I wanted to lash out, to slam my fist on the table. But instead, I just said, in a voice almost devoid of emotion, "You could have told me. We could have tried to fix it." She sighed, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "I didn't know how. We'd drifted apart so far. And you've changed too." A humorless laugh escaped me. "Yeah, I guess I have. But Rachel, do you realize what you've done? You brought him here. Into our home." She nodded, looking down. "I'm sorry. That was never my plan. Last night, it just happened. We'd gone out for dinner, then drinks. You mentioned you'd be working late, maybe an overnight assignment. How considerate of you to remember my schedule." I interrupted, sarcasm oozing from every word. I usually wasn't this biting, but I felt something monstrous in my chest, cold and shaking. "So you believed you had the house to yourself? That's the real reason you came home with him?" She nodded again, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Yes." I exhaled slowly, trying to keep control. "What do you want from me now, Rachel?" She twisted her hands together. I don't know. I hate this, but I can't pretend that it didn't happen, or that I don't care about him." I watched her, feeling a wave of nausea. The woman across from me, my wife of 15 years, was telling me that she cared for someone else, a younger man who'd waltzed into her life, and into our bed, presumably. I tried to recall the version of Rachel who used to fall asleep on my chest after we watched an old Western. That woman felt like a dream now. She must have seen the icy expression on my face because she murmured, "I'll stay with a friend tonight. We can talk more tomorrow." I need to gather my thoughts. "Do whatever you want," I said, standing up. "It's not like I can stop you." The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. She wiped her tears, then quickly grabbed her purse, heading for the door. "I'm sorry, Michael." "Sure," I said, my eyes fixed on some random spot on the wall. The door closed quietly behind her. When she was gone, I slumped into the chair, pressed the heels of my palms against my closed eyes, and just breathed. In and out, as though learning to do it for the first time. Days stretched on. She stayed away, living with a friend. I spent my time drifting between phone calls with my editor, half-heartedly writing an article about city zoning issues. It all felt meaningless. The nights grew long, haunted by the absence of her presence. Some part of me wanted to die, literally to close my eyes and vanish. Not because I needed her to survive, but because I felt so entirely undone, so humiliated, so worthless. There were times I paced the house, stopping by her study. I'd peek inside at the notebooks scattered on the desk. Curiosity gnawed at me. For years we'd shared creative ideas, but those days were gone. I lifted the cover of one spiral-bound notebook she'd left behind. Page after page of scribbled notes, outlines of scenes. A single line jumped out. "He doesn't suspect a thing." I swallowed. Another sentence read, "The husband in my story refuses to accept the truth he sees with his own eyes." I realized with a sick jolt that her new novel was about us, about her affair, only disguised beneath fictional names and places. There was a certain cruelty in her choice to put it all on paper, like a confessional she never intended to share with me. I slammed the notebook shut, feeling my pulse roar in my ears. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend, Greg, asking how I was holding up. I ignored it. Another text from my sister, wanting to know if I was okay. Ignored that too. I couldn't talk to anyone about this, not yet. I didn't have words to describe the slow decomposition of my life. Days later, Rachel asked to come by, to get some of her clothes and talk. I couldn't summon the will to argue. So on a gray afternoon she arrived. I watched her from the living room window, feeling a pang in my gut at the sight of her unlocking the front door with a key I had once been so proud to hand her. Our house key, a symbol of trust. She looked uncertain, hesitating at the doorway. I stood in the hall, arms crossed. How are you?" she asked carefully. Alive, I said. You? She shrugged. I'm sorry, I keep saying that, but I am. I'm sorry. I didn't want you to find out the way you did. I raised an eyebrow. So, you would have preferred a more elegant reveal. I regretted the snide remark, but it slipped out anyway. She closed her eyes. I guess I deserve that. Silence hung between us, thick as fog. Eventually, she cleared her throat. I'm just here to get some clothes. I'll be out of your way soon. Fine. She walked past me, into our bedroom. I followed at a distance, feeling both unwilling to see her rummage through our life together and too curious to stay away. She opened the closet, pulled out a suitcase, and started placing items in it, some dresses, some sweaters, jeans. She grabbed a few pairs of shoes. At one point, she paused over an old photograph pinned to the dresser mirror, the two of us at Niagara Falls, early in our marriage. She stared at it with wet eyes. Why'd you keep this here? She whispered. It was always there, I said, my voice a bit softer. You never took it down. She swallowed, turned away, carefully placing the photo in her purse. Then she zipped the suitcase. I don't know how to do this, she admitted quietly. I never wanted to be the villain in our story. I looked at her, a wave of memory washing over me. Her excitement when she sold her first novel, the tears in her eyes on our wedding day, the way she used to brush my hair aside in the morning. Then I recalled her stepping into this same house with David's hand on her back. Well, I said, you made your choices. I guess that's how you become a villain. Tears slipped silently down her face. We stood there a moment, two strangers bound by a decade and a half of shared life. And now we had no script for what came next. Then she walked out, suitcase trailing behind her. I let her go because I felt too numb to do anything else. Time passed in a haze. I sat at my laptop, trying to write an article about a community fundraiser, but my mind was miles away. I stared at the blinking cursor until my eyes watered. When I did manage to write, I found myself venting on the page. Lines about betrayal, about illusions. Then I'd hastily delete them, reminding myself that the world had no interest in my heartbreak. They wanted local news. By evening, I'd scrounge the kitchen for something to eat, only to find my appetite gone. My phone would ring, friends or family concerned, but I'd let it go to voicemail. The only face-to-face conversation I had was with the clerk at the corner store where I buy whiskey or cheap dinners. In those lonely nights, I'd reflect on the man I'd become. Hollow, quiet, cold inside. I thought about my younger self, how full of hope I'd been when we got married. If I could meet that version of me now, I wouldn't recognize him. He'd be appalled at what I've sunk into. This paralyzed existence, drifting between pain and the desire for everything to just end. Sometimes, the dream of simply not waking up in the morning felt like relief. Yet I couldn't let go entirely. Something in me refused to give Rachel that satisfaction. Or maybe, refused to let this define me. The nights I truly felt the darkness closing in, I'd step onto the back porch, stare at the stars, and remember my mom telling me, "Life's not always fair, Michael, but you've got a backbone. Don't forget it." She died when I was 25. That memory was all I had left of her. One evening, a couple of weeks after Rachel left, she texted me, "We need to talk. It's important. Please." I stared at the message, reading it over and over. Finally, I wrote back, "Fine. Tomorrow, 7 p.m., at the house." She agreed. When the time came, I cleared the living room, turned on a lamp. My reflection stared back at me from the blank TV screen. Tired eyes, face slightly hollow. A man fighting to keep from dissolving. I waited for her. Precisely at 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Rachel standing there, alone. She wore a simple black coat, hair neat, eyes rimmed with faint circles of fatigue. There was a swirl of winter air behind her that made me shiver. She glanced at me, uncertain, and then walked in. We made our way to the living room without exchanging small talk. She perched on the edge of the couch, hands clasped. I stood, arms folded across my chest. "So," I said. She sighed. "I've been staying at a friend's place, but I can't do that forever. We need to decide how we're going to proceed. About the marriage, about the house, about everything." I stared at her for a moment, then nodded. "You want a divorce?" She swallowed. "I don't know if that's what I want. But I also know I can't stay in this limbo. Michael, I'm asking you to at least consider it." An icy anger flared in me. "So after you bring a lover here, humiliate me, you now want me to consider a divorce so you can ride off into the sunset with him?" She winced. "It's not like that. Isn't it? You have feelings for him, right?" She nodded, eyes downcast. "Yes, I do." It felt like a shard of glass lodged in my chest, but I kept my composure. "Then why are you here, Rachel? Why not go to him, let him solve this for you?" Her jaw tightened. "Because I'm trying to do the right thing. You're still my husband. I might have made terrible mistakes, but I'm not heartless. We built a life, and we need a plan for how it ends or continues." I rubbed my face, feeling the stubble under my palm. Finally, I spoke in a low voice. "So you want me to talk about money and lawyers? Right now?" "If that's what it takes," she said, her eyes glossy with tears she was trying not to shed. A bitter part of me almost told her to get the hell out. Another part recognized that this was inevitable. So I took a breath, tried to still the trembling in my hands, and forced myself to sit across from her. She explained in halting words that she'd been offered a small advance from a publisher. Her novel, the one she'd been working on, was nearly complete. She admitted it was inspired by real events, that David had read some chapters. That knowledge alone felt like an extra twist of the knife. My gut burned as she described how the story dealt with a love triangle, a husband unaware, a woman caught in conflict. She believed she could keep the details vague enough that no one would trace them back to me unless they knew us personally. I listened to it all, silent. Then she cleared her throat. "Anyway, the money's enough for me to rent a small studio somewhere. I'm not expecting you to leave the house or anything. But we need to figure out if we're going to legally separate. Are we going to try counseling? Are we going to? I don't know. Maybe we're too far gone for that. I just need to know what you want." My answer came out in a shaky exhale. "I want to never see your face again." That was the rawest truth I had in that moment. She closed her eyes as if I'd slapped her. Okay, she whispered. "I understand. I'll make arrangements. We can talk through the rest with a mediator." A tense silence wrapped around us. Then she stood, tears collecting in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she repeated before turning away. I watched her walk out again. My breath rattled in my chest, like an old engine about to give out. I felt an odd sense of finality, but also the creeping knowledge that it wasn't truly over. Not yet. A week later, I received an unexpected call. The number was unknown. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. "Hello," I said. "Michael Carter?" asked a man's voice. "Speaking. This is David Ramirez. I realize this must be strange, me calling you, but I need to see you." My grip on the phone tightened. My entire body went rigid. "How did you get this number?" I growled. Rachel gave it to me. "Please, hear me out. I need to talk to you, face to face. It's important." I nearly hung up. But some flicker of curiosity, or maybe the savage desire to see the man who destroyed my marriage, made me ask, "What is there to talk about, David?" A pause, then a quiet exhale. "I can't explain it over the phone. I'll meet you anywhere you say. Just, please." I wouldn't ask if it weren't important. My mind raced. The rational part of me told me to hang up, tell him to never call again. Another part, the one that couldn't stop twisting the knife of betrayal, insisted I needed some kind of closure. So I said, "Fine. Meet me at the corner cafe on 9th Street. Tomorrow, 5 p.m., he agreed, sounding somewhat relieved. The call ended. I sank into a chair, my heart pounding. I felt a swirl of anger, confusion, maybe even a trace of curiosity. What could he possibly want? The next day, I arrived at the cafe a few minutes early. It was a small place, dimly lit, with chipped tables and squeaky chairs. My kind of place when I first moved to Chicago. Unassuming, honest in its imperfections. I chose a table in the corner, away from the windows. The barista gave me a concerned look as I ordered black coffee. I must have looked like a man on the verge of something. At precisely 5 p.m., David walked in. He spotted me immediately. His eyes flickered with a guarded tension, but he mustered a polite nod. His hair was neatly styled. He wore a button-down shirt and designer jeans. That confident posture was there, but I noticed the slight slump in his shoulders. He approached, clearing his throat. "Michael," he said quietly, offering a tentative hand. I ignored it. After a moment of awkwardness, he withdrew it and sat across from me. I studied him. Handsome, younger than me, maybe a decade younger. The man who stole my wife. "What do you want?" I asked, letting the coldness show. He leaned forward. "Thank you for meeting me. This is difficult. I know I'm the last person you want to see." I gave a small, humorless nod. "That's true. But you said it was important, so get on with it." He ran a hand through his hair, then said, "I care about Rachel. I won't lie about that. But the situation isn't as black and white as I once thought. She's hurting, and so are you." A bitter laugh escaped me. "You're lecturing me on who's hurting. You broke into my marriage. You two had an affair right under my nose. Forgive me if I don't feel particularly sympathetic to your perspective." He flinched. "I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here because I think we're on a destructive path. All three of us. It's not just about the affair anymore." I narrowed my eyes. "What else is it about?" He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "You probably know Rachel's writing a novel." "Yes. I suspect it's extremely personal. She's poured everything into it, including her regrets, her guilt, her confusion." I blinked. "I know. I've seen some of her notes." He exhaled. "Right. Well, the publisher is pushing her for a sensational angle. They've encouraged her to tap deeper into the raw truth. She's under a lot of pressure to basically use real-life drama to sell the story. She's been telling them bits and pieces about you, about me." My stomach twisted. "She wants to publicly humiliate me even more. That's what this is about." He shook his head. "She's not trying to humiliate you. I think she's desperate, Michael. She thinks if she can control the narrative, somehow she'll salvage some dignity, or maybe keep you from looking like the villain in her own affair. She's all twisted up inside. Trust me, she's not calm about this." I clenched my jaw. "She's made me the unwitting subject of her confessional novel. You, on the other hand, are in on it with her." "No," he said. "At first I was. We talked about it. But the more I got involved, the more I realized I can't handle the deception, the constant scrutiny. I regret how this started. I'm not proud of the affair. And the truth is, I'm worried about Rachel. She's talking about maybe leaving Chicago for a while after the book is finished, but she's not in a good mental place. She needs help, not more drama." I stared at him, trying to piece together his motivation. "So, what do you propose?" He took a breath. "I care about her, but I also realize how badly I've hurt you. I'm not sure there's a tidy solution. Still, I want to talk, man to man. I wanted you to know there's no grand plan to ruin your life. It's messy. She might publish that novel. People might figure out it's about you too. I just don't want to see it spiral into a bigger tragedy. If there's any chance you two can find closure without further damage." The gall of this man, to talk about closure. My cheeks warmed with anger. I hissed, "Closure? You want to be the good guy now? Step aside and watch me pick up the pieces of my marriage." He looked pained. I know you think I'm the villain. Maybe I am. But for what it's worth, Rachel and I, it's not some cheap fling. But it's also not stable. She's not stable. I realized we were leaning over the table, voices low. I took a slow breath, sat back. The cafe around us carried on, oblivious. I stared into my coffee, my reflection trembling on the surface. So, I said, you're telling me to handle her with care. That she's fragile. And you're also telling me you have no illusions about being the white knight. He nodded, silent. I let out a shaky breath. David, there's nothing left to salvage. She wants me to consider divorce. So do I. If she wants to humiliate me further with this novel, that's on her. I don't see how you factor in, except as the catalyst for this fiasco. His voice grew tight. I just needed you to know that no matter how it seems, I don't want to see you destroyed. That's all. If you decide to divorce, do it. If you want me out of the picture, say the word. Anger rose again. You think you'll just vanish. You want me to give my blessing or something. He opened his mouth, closed it. After a tense moment, he said, I'm not going to vanish unless Rachel wants me to. But if you need me to keep my distance, I will. She can contact me if she chooses. I just can't stand the thought of some final meltdown that ends with heartbreak for everyone. A rueful laugh escaped me. Too late for heartbreak. That's done. I checked the time on my phone. We're done here. David nodded. He stood, sliding his chair back. All right. Thank you for hearing me out. I stayed seated, refusing to shake his hand. He walked off, the cafe door jingling behind him. I stared after him for a while, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. Did I feel better or worse? I couldn't tell. All I knew was something in me had cracked further, and I felt a cold surge in my blood. Maybe it was a new kind of determination. Maybe it was the seed of revenge. That night, I poured myself a whiskey. My heart pounded as I thought about what David said. If there's any chance you two can find closure without further damage. Those words echoed in my mind, but closure wasn't enough. Something deeper stirred inside me. Rage, humiliation, a sense that I'd been robbed not just of my marriage, but of my dignity. And there was also the matter of her new novel, her twisted confession. That was a betrayal all its own. I remember the echo of my mother's voice, telling me, sometimes you have to fight for yourself, son. She was a strong woman, forced to raise me alone after my dad bailed. My father's betrayal shaped my mother's unwavering stance against deception. I realized with a start that my entire life, I tried to be a better man than my father. And now, I was the one who got cheated on. The irony was suffocating. I pulled open a drawer in her study. Inside, I found the typed pages of her draft, the final version she was preparing for submission. She must have printed it out before leaving. My throat went dry. I began reading. The first few pages bristled with tension. A fictionalized version of me, described as the unsuspecting husband, too comfortable to notice the cracks. Then lines about the new man, his vitality that awakened something dormant. The pages dripped with longing and resentment, culminating in an affair that the husband only discovers at the end. And then, the final chapters made a mockery of him, my stand-in. He was portrayed as dull-witted, complacent, unfeeling. The narrator, clearly modeled after Rachel, took pity on him but ultimately left to pursue her true passion, sacrificing the marriage for self-discovery. I felt my heart pound in my ears. It was a savage portrayal, half-lies twisted with half-truths. She was rewriting our history to justify her own betrayal. The worst part was how well written it was. Raw, painfully vivid, sure to hook a certain audience. And I realized, in that moment, that she didn't just cheat physically. She also used me as creative fodder, twisting the knife deeper by framing herself as the tragic heroine and me as a clueless barrier. I felt an icy calm flood my veins. Revenge is not a reckoning. I remembered hearing once. It's a liberation. A chance to free yourself from the prison of betrayal. Maybe that was what I needed. Not to destroy her, but to reclaim something of my own. The next day, I called my editor at the newspaper. I need a few personal days, I said. There's something I have to handle. He sighed. Michael, I can't keep giving you time off. Your pieces are already behind schedule. Please, I cut in, my voice trembling. This is life or death for me right now. A pause, then a reluctant sigh. Fine. Take the rest of the week. But I expect you back bright and early Monday. Hanging up, I felt a surge of determination. If Rachel planned to unleash a story that cast me as the fool, maybe it was time I wrote my own version. A column or an essay. Something that laid bare my side of the truth. I had a platform. People read my work, at least in the city. I could present my own narrative with the same raw honesty. But I had a second idea, darker in some ways. I recalled that David said her publisher wanted sensational elements, real drama. If the public glimpsed a more direct confrontation, or if I shed light on exactly how she manipulated our life for her novel, her story might become less brave confession and more expose of a manipulative writer. Could I sabotage her success? Was that too petty? The swirl of possibility both thrilled and terrified me. I sat down at my computer, opening a blank document. My fingers hovered over the keys. The thought of bearing my soul, my pain, in a public forum felt nauseating. But it was also the only way I could wrest some control back. I started typing, ignoring the stinging in my eyes. My name is Michael Carter. I've been a journalist for 20 years. I believed in truth, in fairness, and in the sanctity of marriage. Not long ago, I discovered how easily those beliefs can be shattered. I wrote for hours. The words spilled out, about the slow unraveling of our marriage, the unanswered questions, the betrayal I walked in on. I kept names vague, but I planted enough detail that anyone who truly knew us would piece it together. I described the emotional toll, the nights of emptiness, the moment I realized I was a character in someone else's story. By the time I finished, the sun was setting. I leaned back, reading the last paragraph. My hands trembled. I felt a surge of conflicting emotions, pride at having told my truth, shame at having stooped to public airing of private pain, and above all, a sense of raw vulnerability. I was about to reveal everything. I saved the document. I knew that once it was published, there'd be no going back. Did I truly want to do this? I stood, looked around the silent house. My gaze fell on the old wedding photo, us smiling, arms around each other, bright sunlight behind us. So much had changed. I wasn't that man anymore. She wasn't that woman. I remembered David's words, I just don't want to see it spiral into a bigger tragedy. Another voice in my mind countered. She used your life as material. She took your dignity. This is your chance to reclaim it. I decided to sleep on it. If I still felt the same in the morning, I'd send it to my editor, pitch it as a deeply personal piece, a cautionary tale about betrayal, something real. That night, though, I barely slept. My thoughts roamed to the concept of revenge. More than once, I actually wished I could die, to escape the pain. The swirling sense that no matter what I did, I'd never be the same again. But morning came, along with a grim clarity. This was my life, my story. If I truly believed I deserved to be heard, I wouldn't flinch from it now. I emailed the draft to my editor. He called me within the hour. Michael, I don't know what to say, he began. This is personal, raw. It's not our usual style of news coverage, but it's compelling. It's painfully honest. I stared at my reflection in the window. I want it published as a personal column. If that means it won't run in the main section, maybe the editorial or opinion page. I need to do this. He sighed. Okay, I'll see what I can do. But there might be blowback. We're not tabloid journalists. That's fine, I said. Let the blowback come. We hung up. I felt adrenaline surging, but also dread. There was no telling how Rachel would react. Maybe she'd hate me forever. Maybe she'd retaliate in her own way. But something in me felt liberated, like I'd reclaimed the right to speak. The piece ran 2 days later, under the headline, Betrayal in the Heartland. A journalist's confession. It was accompanied by a simple illustration. No photos, no names, just a stark silhouette of a man with a broken heart. It was about 1,500 words, less than half of what I'd originally written. The editors trimmed it for clarity, but it retained the raw core. I caught my wife cheating, and I was coping with the fallout. I explained the lonely nights, the humiliating discovery, and the universal theme that heartbreak can strike anyone. The day it ran, my phone blew up. Colleagues, old acquaintances, even a few strangers wrote to say they were moved by the honesty. Some criticized me, claiming I was airing dirty laundry. Others commended my courage. Rachel's phone calls flooded in, but I didn't answer. I knew she was furious, or hurt, or both, but I couldn't bring myself to speak to her. I needed time. Finally, on the second evening after publication, she showed up at the house. The door banged as she came in, eyes blazing. She must have still had a key. I stood in the hallway, blocking her from going further inside. "You had no right," she hissed, tears shimmering in her eyes. "No right," I repeated, voice shaking. "You wrote an entire novel about me, about us, painting me as a clueless obstacle. Don't talk to me about rights." She threw her hands up. "That novel isn't published yet. I never intended to out you publicly. But now my publisher's calling, saying the story's already out there in some editorial, my personal life, splashed for everyone to read." I stepped closer, my voice dangerously soft. "So it's okay if you do it in a novel, disguised behind fictional names, but not okay if I speak the truth in my own words." She stared at me, fury and sorrow mingling in her eyes. "That's different. Yours is so explicit. Everyone knows it's me." I felt a wave of bitterness. "Maybe if you hadn't cheated, you wouldn't need to worry about your reputation. Actions have consequences, Rachel." She started to retort, but then her face crumpled. She sank against the wall, covering her mouth with her hand. A sob escaped her. It was raw, pained, like an animal's cry. I watched her, my heart pounding. I wanted to feel triumphant, to relish her tears. But I couldn't. The sight of her agony stirred conflicting feelings. Love, pity, anger. "I never wanted us to end like this," she whispered. God, Michael, I'm so sorry. I know that sounds hollow now, but it's all I have left." I stayed silent, unsure if I could handle the swirl of emotions. Then, in a trembling voice, she said, Please, can't we try to talk this through? Not for our marriage, maybe that's beyond saving, but for ourselves. We can't keep wounding each other." I swallowed. The memory of David's words, he wanted to avoid a bigger tragedy, slid into my mind. "Fine," I murmured, stepping back. "Talk." She nodded shakily. We moved to the living room. My hands felt cold, my heart thundered. She sat on the edge of the couch, as if prepared to flee. "I know you feel betrayed," she began. "I understand. I betrayed you. I was lonely, I was restless, and I found excitement in David. But if I could go back and handle it differently, without lies, without dragging you through hell, I would." Her eyes sought mine. I looked away, focusing on the pattern of the rug. "It's too late," I said. She nodded, tears running down her cheeks. "It is. That's why I'm filing for divorce. I was trying to wait, to see if maybe we could talk first, but I think it's what needs to happen. We can't stay in this purgatory. It's killing us both." A dull ache throbbed in my chest. I nodded. "All right. If that's what you want, I won't fight you." She swallowed. "There's something else. My publisher's pushing me to release the novel soon. They saw your article. They think it might stir interest if we move quickly." Her voice wavered. But I told them I'm not comfortable exploiting our tragedy like that. Maybe I was before, but your article changed how I see it. It forced me to face the harm I'm doing. I told them I want a rewrite, to preserve the emotional truth without making it so obviously you and me. They're unhappy, but I'm insisting. I studied her. She seems sincere. So your grand confession might be toned down. A shaky nod. Yes, I wish I'd done it that way from the start. I thought exposing the raw pain would make for a better story, a bigger impact. But now I see I was just using it to justify my affair. Silence sat between us. I stared at the wall, recalling the lines from her notebook. Then I exhaled slowly. I can't say I forgive you, Rachel. Not yet. Maybe someday. But if you want to do the right thing now, then do it. Don't just say it. She nodded, tears slipping free. I will. We sat for a moment more, both unsure how to end the conversation. Finally, she rose. Thank you for hearing me out, she whispered. I'll contact you about the divorce details. All right, I said, voice raw. She walked to the door. Paused. I know it means nothing now, but I really did love you once. Part of me always will. I closed my eyes. Then hold on to that part, if you can. She left, closing the door gently. The echo of it rang in my ears. I stood there, breath trembling again, feeling both devastation and a flicker of something like relief. Over the next few weeks, the divorce proceedings began. Lawyers got involved. Papers were filed. The house was to remain mine, partially because I paid most of the mortgage, partially because Rachel seemed to want a fresh start. I found a certain grim solace in the process. The wheels of an ending were in motion. I saw David once more, at the grocery store of all places. We locked eyes for a tense moment. He gave a nod of acknowledgement, a ghost of regret in his expression. I stared back, said nothing, and walked away. I heard from mutual acquaintances that David and Rachel were still seeing each other, but it was an on-again, off-again situation. She was rewriting her novel, apparently in a more ambiguous style. I even got word that her publisher might delay it for a year. None of that mattered much to me anymore. I was busy finalizing the divorce, trying to pay bills, and sending out job applications to bigger newspapers. Maybe a new environment would help me heal. I spent my nights alone in the house, occasionally stepping into her former study, noticing the emptiness where her desk used to be. Each time, I felt that same pang of sorrow. 15 years gone. And yet, a small voice inside me whispered that perhaps I was free in a way I'd never been before. No more illusions, no more half-truths. I'd survived the heartbreak. I hadn't crumbled into dust, even if part of me had wanted to. The final divorce hearing was a subdued affair. We met in a small office with a mediator. The lawyers droned on about assets, finances, final signatures. Rachel and I avoided eye contact, each scribbling our name on the dotted lines, each breath feeling heavier than the last. When we were done, there was no dramatic outburst, no final tearful confession, just a forced civility. She left before I did. I watched her go, the corridor seeming to darken a little with each of her footsteps. I realized I might never see her again. Not really, aside from happenstance, or if we needed to finalize some legal detail. I felt a sharp ache in my chest. Then I walked outside, into the cold Chicago wind, and breathed in. For the first time in a while, my breath felt steady, like maybe my lungs had remembered how to work on their own. I looked up at the gray sky. The city clattered around me. Traffic, footsteps, voices. I thought about everything that had happened, from the moment I first suspected her of growing distant, all the way to that night she came home with David Ramirez in tow. The memory still churned my stomach, but I realized I wasn't trembling as I used to. The feeling was more hollow now, less like a raw wound, and more like a scar. I caught a cab back to the house, home, though it felt less like that with every passing day. The living room was dim and quiet when I entered. I set down my keys, took a breath. My mind flashed back to how she once looked curled up on the couch, reading a draft of her own novel, sipping tea. I thought I might break down, but I didn't. Instead, I walked to the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and stood at the counter, noticing how my hands didn't shake anymore. Maybe this was the final curtain call for the life I'd known, the last act in a tragic play. But I felt a faint stirring of hope, because revenge had come in an unexpected form. Not the triumphant destruction of my wife's reputation, though I'd certainly delivered a blow with that article. Instead, the real revenge was that I was no longer imprisoned by her lies. I had told my truth, and I found the strength to let go. It didn't bring me joy, but it brought me a strange kind of release. I closed my eyes, letting out a slow exhale. Revenge is not a reckoning. It's a liberation. I remembered reading that somewhere, maybe in one of my own columns. Now I understood it. Part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Another part wanted to sink to the floor and weep. But what I did instead was walk upstairs to my old desk, open my laptop, and begin typing. Not an article, not a rehash of everything that went wrong, but a new document, a new story. My story. I wrote about a man who lost himself, who found himself again in the ashes of his marriage. And with every keystroke, I felt a little more alive, a little more certain that I would endure. I wrote until late into the night, until the house felt silent and vast around me. Then, finally, I saved the file, closed my laptop, and stared at the darkness of the room. My breath, though still uneven, flowed a bit easier than before. Maybe that was enough. Downstairs, the shadows shifted in the corners, silent witnesses to an ending and a beginning. I half smiled to myself, a mix of sorrow and something close to relief. Then I whispered the old word that had once symbolized my confusion, Zaneves, curtain. Only this time, I said it with acceptance, as if I were finally bringing a close to the play. Then I stood, turned off the light, and let the darkness wash over me.